Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy, but we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, our shortest question session of the week, so concise questions and responses appreciated as always. Question number 1, I call Rachael Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what engagement it has had with local stakeholders regarding the protection of wild goats in the Scottish borders.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We have not had any engagement with local stakeholders on this issue. As the landowners, it is for Oxygen Conservation Limited to consider how any reduction in the wild goat population should be achieved in practice. Oxygen Conservation has produced a question and answer document which has been circulated to all local residents and published updates in a quarterly newsletter on their website. Nature Scot has also provided several members of the community, the Wild Goat Conservation Group, local political representatives, councillors, MSPs and an MP with advice and information on the legal status of feral goats.
Rachael Hamilton.
I thank Jim Fairley for that answer. Wild goats have roamed Langham Moor for centuries. Over 12,000 local residents have signed this petition calling for their protection. They're not just part of the landscape, but a living link to Scotland's past. Yet the Scottish Government's refusal to grant them protected status has enabled a cull that aimed to reduce a herd of 138 to just 20 during birthing season. So will the Minister commit to meeting with me and the Wild Goat Preservation Group, work with us to find a real workable solution to safeguard this unique part of the Scottish Borders' natural and cultural heritage?
Minister.
I understand the sentiment with which the member brings this question forward, but as I've said, this is an issue for Oxygen Conservation Limited. It is their land to decide what it is that they are going to do in order to achieve the restoration targets that they are setting out.
Question number 2, Pauline McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it plans to review planning laws regarding the provision of private purpose-built student accommodation in light of reported concerns over the concentration of student accommodation in certain localities and objections from local residents.
Minister Ivan McKee.
The Planning Scotland Act 1997, as amended, requires planning authorities, when preparing their local development plans, to consider the housing needs of persons undertaking further and higher education. This will inform land allocated for development and decisions on individual planning applications. We have no plans to amend this legislation. Planning authorities can prepare guidance to support their plans. For example, the Glasgow City Plan guidance sets out a clear framework for supporting purpose-built student accommodation in appropriate locations and identifying areas of concentration where further development would undermine residential amenity.
Pauline McNeill.
Scotland does need good affordable student accommodation, but planning consents in Glasgow seem to be granted in a way that appears like they're being handed out as an easy fix for gap sites. And we're already seeing an oversaturation because purpose-built student accommodation is currently favoured by investors due to the ability to charge high rents. And last week, the proposal for a 9-storey student accommodation block was approved on the site of the former O2 ABC iconic music venue. But the site is just one of many student developments which have been heavily objected to by local residents and community groups. Does the Cabinet Secretary share my concerns about the volume of applications for purpose-built student accommodation where there is saturation? And does he agree that there should be some right to challenge the over-provision that doesn't exist now?
Minister.
Well, as already indicated, the local authorities, Glasgow included, have got the ability to identify areas where they think areas of concentration where further development would undermine residential amenity. That power already exists. There's clearly also the power for local communities to produce local place plans to feed into local development plans. But I think it's also true to recognise, I think the member does, that students studying at our colleges and universities are a hugely important part of society. I want to welcome international students and to make provision for them, and any provision in the PBS issue space obviously takes pressure off the private rented sector, which I think we would also agree is to be welcome.
Brief supplementary, Ben McPherson.
Of course, we want to support our students and welcome those from abroad, but I do think it's time to signal to PBSA developers that their plans are increasingly unwelcome in communities like those I represent. In my constituency and in Edinburgh as a whole, there is increasing concern with the amount of PBSA being built in our capital city, especially when there is an acute housing emergency. In many instances, PBSA extracts money out of Scotland, sometimes into tax havens, and uses up valuable urban land where normal housing should be being built instead. Therefore, I urge the Scottish Government to work with City of Edinburgh Council to restrict future PBSA development if possible, and its often in corporate exploitation of students and Scotland's urban land.
Minister.
What I would say is that the point I made earlier, we want to provide accommodation for students, and I think the case would be that where there is PBSA, that would indeed take pressure off private rented and other parts of the market. But as already indicated, local authorities already have the power to be able to identify areas where they feel that further development would undermine residential amenity and to build that into their local development plans. And of course, planning is delegated to local authorities in that regard.
Question number 3, Sue Webber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it plans to undertake a regulatory check of existing Transport Scotland Act 2001 powers to allow local authorities and regional transport partnerships to implement local road user charging schemes.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
On the 12th of June, the Scottish Government published the Car Use Reduction Policy Statement jointly with COSLA, which includes a commitment to a regulatory check of existing discretionary powers for local road user charging schemes under the Transport Scotland Act 2001. It was published jointly by me and Councillor Gail McGregor as COSLA leader on the environment and transport, who someone Sue Webber will be familiar with as she is a member of her own political party. The Scottish Government will now establish a working group that will include membership from regional transport partnerships and local authorities, including those who have been seeking progress on such a regulatory check to ensure secondary legislation from back in 2001 remains fit for purpose, as of course any such road user charging would only happen if councils wanted to use those 2000 powers themselves. The work of that group will inform a timeline for the check.
Webber.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary, and to remind you that Gail McGregor was speaking on behalf of COSLA, not on behalf of the Conservative Party. So after being forced to scrap its 2030 car use target, the SNP now plans to continue its war on motorists by charging them for using our pothole-ridden roads. To reduce car use, we should be providing efficient and affordable public transport alternatives. Yet under SNP control, ScotRail is deterring passengers by cutting services and packing commuters like sardines into their carriages. So does the Cabinet Secretary accept that the Scottish Government need to focus on incentives rather than penalties to encourage Scots to leave their cars at home?
Thank you. Always through the chair, colleagues.
So I wasn't forced to change that 20% car reduction by 2030. I said it was unachievable and not wanted. Indeed, the Climate Change Committee have said that Scotland would only need to reduce its car use by 6% by 2035. Now, some parts of Scotland may want to go further, and we may need to go further as part of our climate change plan. But in terms of how we shift, that's why we have a big focus on how we provide our public transport services. And under public ownership, ScotRail is one of the top performing rail services in the UK, with more passengers and also more frequency and more services than before public ownership took place. So in terms of our investment and our support for public transport, I agree with her. We need to have accessible, affordable transport for people to use. But actually, if we're serious about climate change, and I don't think the Conservative Party is anymore, we have to make sure that we take steps to protect our environment, protect people in terms of the car use, encourage them to use EVs, but also invest in our public transport system.
Thank you. Question number 4, Graham Simpson.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it has plans to reform the planning appeals process.
Minister Ivan McKee.
The Scottish Government has no current plans to reform the planning appeals process, which it considers to be robust, fair and efficient.
Graham Simpson.
Well, can I thank the Minister for that brief answer? He will know that there have been concerns expressed in Parliament about the planning appeals system, which allows one unelected official to overturn decisions taken by elected councillors. We've recently had a development in North Lanarkshire at Woodhull and Faskin, which was rejected, quite rightly, by North Lanarkshire councillors on the detailed advice of planners. Now, the applicant in that case could appeal, and that decision could be overturned by one person, a Scottish Government reporter. Does the Minister not accept that that is fundamentally wrong, and would he agree to review the system?
Minister.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I think, obviously, I can't comment on any individual cases, but the right to appeal is a long-standing and important feature of the planning system. All appeals are determined on their own merits and on the same legal basis as a planning application in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And parties who have made representations on an application are given the opportunity to confirm their objection or support if it goes to appeal. So, as I say, that's a well-established part of our system, and I would not want to take steps to change that.
Question number 5, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the aim under Action 20 of the Housing to 2040 strategy to streamline and accelerate the adaptation system.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McCallan.
Presiding Officer, this Government is committed to ensuring that older and disabled people in Scotland have choice, dignity and freedom to access suitable homes, to enable them to participate as the full and equal citizens that they are. Adaptations play a vital role in this, which is why we have more than doubled our registered social landlords adaptations programme budget to £20.9 million for this financial year. My officials have begun engaging with stakeholders and are working on setting the scope and timescales for the piece of work Mr Beattie refers to, and I'll be glad to update him when this is finalised.
Colin Beattie.
Thank you for that response. The gaps in legislation has left a number of my constituents in dire circumstances. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm if the review will be completed by the end of this parliamentary term, and if she plans to meet particularly with stakeholders in the park home sector?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the exact timescales for the review are still to be agreed, and I mentioned that my officials are meeting with a number of stakeholders as the work develops, but I hear the urgency that Mr Beattie is applying to the issue, and I will bear that in mind as we progress. On the issue of park homes, we're committed to making sure that such residents have appropriate rights and protections. I would encourage anyone that requires an adaptation, including those living in park homes, to engage with their local authority, and would urge all local authorities to make sure that they are providing support under existing provisions.
Question number 6, Keith Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and my apologies for not being here at the start of this session. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the NHS Forth Valley regarding access to health services for communities that rely on local bus links.
Mr Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government meets regularly with NHS Forth Valley to discuss health services. We expect NHS boards to consider the needs of their communities, including ensuring access to healthcare. Where an NHS board is subsidising a bus service, as it is in this case here, I would expect them to work closely with the operator and the local authority to ensure the service continues to meet the ongoing needs of the community.
Keith Brown.
Can I thank the Minister for her answer? When the decision was made to site the new Forth Valley Royal Hospital in Larbert, Forth Valley Health Board gave a clear and binding commitment that accessible public transport would be maintained for all communities. And that commitment, and I know because I was there, was critical in securing public support at that time, and successive health secretaries have recognised and reinforced the expectation that it must be upheld. But now many of my constituents in Clackmannanshire are deeply concerned about the recent removal of key stops on the H1 and H2 bus routes, lifeline services for elderly, disabled and carless patients who rely on them to attend essential appointments. Will the Minister join me in making clear to NHS Forth Valley that they are obliged to sustain the original commitment, and that she will personally instruct the Board, as previous health ministers have done, to take urgent steps to ensure that no vulnerable patient is left without a reliable route to care?
Minister.
I thank Keith Brown for his question. The Scottish Government knows that transport plays an important role in supporting patients' health journeys. Removing transport and other barriers will help ensure that patients across Scotland are able to access the right care in the right place and at the right time. And with the specifics of Forth Valley, I would be very happy to write to NHS Forth Valley within this regard.
Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Clackmannanshire Council, together with local groups, have voiced strong opposition to the proposed changes, emphasising the importance of maintaining a reliable bus service to the hospital at Forth Valley and Larbert. These are serious concerns, and the changes could negatively impact on elderly and disabled who rely upon the existing bus routes. So what additional support is the Scottish Government considering, and what is it doing to ensure that Forth Valley assist these vulnerable individuals?
Minister.
I thank Alexander Stewart for his question and agree that the point of having good, reliable transport to health services helps everyone, which is why, as I have indicated to Mr Brown, that I will write to NHS Forth Valley to underline the importance of their investment decision in transport within the Forth Valley Hospital area.
Question number 7, Mark Griffin.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what health policies it has in place to support the neurodevelopment of children born prematurely through their early years and adolescence.
Minister Jenny Minto.
In Scotland, babies who have been in neonatal care receive a developmental assessment at 2 years of corrected age as part of a routine follow-up. This assessment is crucial for identifying any developmental delays or potential problems early on. The assessment is typically a face-to-face appointment and is usually conducted by a multidisciplinary team. The Scottish Government has also set out standards for services to support children and young people who have neurodevelopmental profiles with support needs in the National Neurodevelopmental Specification. This specification aims to ensure that children and families receive the supports and access to services that meet their needs at the earliest opportunity based on the GIRFEC approach.
Mark Griffin.
I thank the Minister for that response. We know that children born prematurely have a higher risk of being neurodivergent. Can I ask what cross-government work takes place, particularly between health and education, to support those born prematurely, since up to 3 children in every Scottish primary school class will have been born prematurely? And will the Scottish Government commit to providing guidance for public service providers who work with children to become prem-aware, to spot the signs of neurodevelopmental delay early and help ensure appropriate support is in place for those children?
Minister.
I thank Mark Griffin for his follow-up question, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank him for the work that he does specifically in this area. I had the pleasure of meeting with Sarah Brown and James Boardman to learn about the work that their World Edinburgh Birth Consort is doing, and it's a 25-year study now into year 7, actually following the progress that neonatal babies have taken. And I think that's a really important piece of study to support work in health, social care and education. If I can come back to Mr Griffin with regards to the detail of his question, I'd be very happy to do, but from my perspective it has to be a collaborative, multidisciplinary team approach, as I indicated in my first answer.
Question number 8, Marie McNeill.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it's working with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde to meet the demand for ADHD and autism assessments.
Mr Tom Arthur.
The Scottish Government has allocated £3.1 billion to NHS Greater and Glasgow Clyde in this financial year. NHS boards, along with local partners, are responsible for prioritising funding to ensure that their local neurodivergent population receives the support they need at the right time and in the right place. To support this, we have commissioned the National Autism Implementation Team to support local health partners and NHS boards, including Greater Glasgow and Clyde, to develop, enhance and redesign existing local adult neurodevelopmental services to meet local needs. We are also working closely with health boards and local authorities towards implementing the National Neurodevelopmental Specification for children and young people.
Marie McNair.
I thank the Minister for that response. I have a case in my constituency of a child who has been waiting for 3 years and 8 months for the ADHD assessment, and this is extremely concerning, and by the time that they get that, they'll be in 17, and it's most likely they'll be then going to leave school. Can the Minister further comment on what more can be done to support children who are facing excessive waiting times?
Minister.
Well, can I thank Marie McNeill for raising this important issue and say that I do recognise there has been a significant increase in children and families seeking support and diagnosis for their neurodivergence, and that this is creating challenges for a range of services. But support should be put in place to meet a child's needs rather than be dependent on formal diagnosis. That includes support in schools. Local authorities have duties under the Additional Support for Learning Act 2004 to identify and provide for the additional needs of their pupils. An additional support need can arise for any reason, and a diagnosis of ADHD is not required before support is put in place.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of That concludes general questions. Next item of business is First Minister's questions, and at question number 1 I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. 1 in 3 cancer patients in Scotland don't begin to receive treatment within the government's target time. I'm going to repeat that for the First Minister's benefit. 1 in 3 cancer patients are not receiving treatment when they need it. And in one health board, NHS borders, fewer than half begin treatment within the 62-day target. For NHS Grampian, it's almost as bad. And behind these new and bleak statistics are real people. For them and their families, the SNP's culture of failure can be the difference between life and death. Does John Swinney accept that this is unacceptable? And what will he do to meet cancer treatment times?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, before I answer Mr Finlay's question, could I acknowledge the announcement that you made at the weekend, Presiding Officer, of your intention not to seek re-election to Parliament at the next election, express my appreciation to your leadership in Parliament as Presiding Officer. In relation to the issue on cancer waiting times, Mr Finlay raises a serious and important issue, and I want to begin by expressing my regret that the cancer waiting times are in all circumstances not being achieved around the country. The 31-day target, which is the target for once an assessment has been made that treatment is required, that target of 95% is very closely met. It's 94.1%, but the 62-day target is the performance is not acceptable. And what the government is doing is focusing on improving the activities and the investment that is made in individual boards to ensure that performance can be improved. We are able to demonstrate, as the data does show, that in parts of the country the target is being met. It's been met in Lanarkshire, and the model of care in Lanarkshire of achieving both the 62-day and the 31-day target is meeting the standard, and what we are ensuring is that the learning from NHS Lanarkshire is being applied in other boards around the country to ensure that the performance is achieved. That is the approach the Government is taking to ensure that the needs of patients are met and that we can move at the earliest possible opportunity to address any concerns about cancer within the population.
Russell Finlay.
I also echo the First Minister's sentiments and thank you for your service. He seems content that 1 in 14 health boards this target has been met. It's simply not good enough. The SNP Government's flagship NHS recovery plan of 2021 is failing patients just as we warned that it would. Promises to reduce cancer treatment times keep being broken. Yet John Swinney will never criticise Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon's plan. At least his Public Health Minister has come clean about the price of SNP failure. Asked if lives are being lost because of late cancer diagnosis, she said, yes, they may well be. She said this in the same week that it was reported that the SNP are sitting on a £550 million underspend from last year. That's more than £500 million unspent. So will John Swinney increase cancer spending and use some of that unspent money to launch an emergency cancer fund?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, within the statistics, I think two important observations have to be made in addition to what I've already said to Mr Finlay. First of all, we are treating more patients with cancer on time within both standards compared to the same quarter 6 years ago, pre-pandemic, on both the 31-day standard and the 62-day standard. So our services are treating and interacting with more people than they were pre-COVID, which is a demonstration of the increases in capacity that we have in place. The second point to make is that in relation to the 31-day target, the median wait, that is the point at which, the midpoint in which more people are being treated, or the point at which people are being treated, is 3 days. 3 days. And last year, that point was 4 days. So we are finding improvements in the time in which treatment is being delivered. So I hope that gives Mr Finlay some confidence that the focus on improving capacity within the National Health Service to deal with cancer is at the heart of the Government's plans. Now, Mr Finlay referred to the underspend in the budget. Now, the underspend, of course, is applied to the financial provisions of this financial year. So I want to reassure members of the public that all of the underspend from the previous financial year will be able to be deployed in supporting public services, which of course assists us in supporting the budget that we have in place, which has already increased funding for cancer services in Scotland as part of the National Health Service budget, which of course is the highest budget that has ever been deployed for the National Health Service in the history of the NHS. And the Government attached the priority to this important investment in putting forward the budget that has seen a record financial settlement in place for the National Health Service.
Russell Finlay.
John Swinney seems to be patting himself in the back, which will be absolutely no consolation to all those people waiting for treatment. Because since John Swinney became First Minister, over 3,000 cancer patients are waiting longer for treatment than his government promised. Every passing day puts more lives at risk, but this government is complacent. There's no sense of urgency. The Health Secretary, who's not here today, wasn't even in Scotland to respond to these latest shocking figures. He was on a second trip to Japan, and I've no idea why he's not here today. It's absolutely ridiculous. The SNP press release said that his Japan visit was to talk up Scotland's health technology sector, and I'm all for promoting Scottish technical innovation. But this analogue SNP government can't even deliver a basic app for Scottish NHS patients. So can John Swinney tell worried cancer patients and their families how they will be helped by a Health Secretary collecting more air miles?
First Minister.
President Officer, the Health Secretary is in Japan at the Osaka Expo, which is a partnership between the Scottish Government and the United Kingdom Government, which on 3 occasions this year Scotland has an opportunity to highlight some of the strengths within the Scottish economy. One of those strengths which the Health Secretary is promoting is the life sciences sector, which is a huge asset to Scotland, and the Health Secretary is in Japan at my request, with my approval, to ensure that Scotland's life sciences sector is able to be promoted to an international audience, given the significance of the life sciences sector to our university and research community in Scotland. Now, what I want to make clear to Mr Finlay is that the Government has put in place the investment provided for in the budget, which Mr Finlay didn't support, to ensure that we are able to support the delivery of healthcare services in Scotland with record funding available. We are concentrating. Mr Finlay asked me what steps could be taken to reassure patients. What I would say to patients is that the learning that has been developed in NHS Lanarkshire about improvements in the delivery of cancer services are being shared around the country. The rapid cancer diagnostic services, which are also in place in a variety of other health boards in the country, have seen significant reductions in waiting times as a consequence in different parts of the country, and all of these measures will be deployed to ensure that cancer care is delivered where people need it within our country.
Russell Finlay.
It's perhaps not surprising that Neil Gray was out of the country talking tech, because the previous SNP Health Secretary quit because of his own overseas tech difficulties. But where is Neil Gray's focus? There's a cancer care crisis, but he took taxpayer-funded limos to the pub and the football, and then he decided to go to Japan. And it says everything that John Swinney's happy to admit he sent him there. This is more than a couple of bad calls. It's a fundamental issue about his focus and professional judgment. If Neil Gray really thinks his time is better spent in Japan than in Scotland during an NHS crisis, then he shouldn't be Health Secretary. What has the Health Secretary done to give John Swinney any confidence that he can bring down cancer waiting times?
First Minister.
Mr Finlay started his questions raising very serious issues about the delivery of cancer care in Scotland. And I am determined to engage on those issues, because those are issues that I recognise to be of genuine concern to members of the public. I want to assure Parliament that the focus of the First Minister, the Health Secretary and the Government is on improving waiting times. That's what we were elected to deliver, and that's what we are taking the steps to ensure is the case. It's why we put the investment in place which Mr Finlay didn't support. It's why we have the focused discussions with health boards about improving performance, about learning the lessons from areas of the country that are performing well, so that we can improve standards in other parts of the country. This Government is absolutely focused on reducing waiting times for cancer and other conditions, and that will remain the focus of my Government.
Thank you. Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
President Officer, can I start by joining others in thanking you for your service and wishing you all the best for whatever comes next, although I fully expect over the next 10 months you'll continue to hold us to proper decorum in the Parliament and tell us off from time to time in that period too. Presiding Officer, just this week, house building at its lowest level since 2012. Sexual violence and domestic abuse rising. Delayed discharge at a record high. Almost 1 in 3 Scots forced to go private to get health care, and cancer waiting times the worst on record. Has the guy that claimed to steady the ship now become the captain of the Titanic?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, Mr Sarwar raises a number of important issues, and let me just go through a number of those. On housing, the Government, of course, has put in place a budget provision for this year which has seen a significant increase in housing investment, which will assist us in the affordable housing plans, building on the fact that in Scotland we've built 47% more affordable houses per head of population than in England, and 73% more than in Labour-run Wales. So that will help us. And of course, that's in a budget that Mr Sarwar never voted for. On the issues in relation to delayed discharge, 97% of patients are discharged from hospital without any delay whatsoever, and delayed discharge is falling. On recorded crime is broadly stable with where it has been. The increase of reporting of sexual crime is because more people are prepared to come forward, because this government is prepared to pursue sexual crime and bring offenders to account. And on cancer treatment, as I've explained to Mr Finlay, the government is focused on improving waiting times and reducing the waits that individuals have. So this government is absolutely focused on the priorities of the people of Scotland, and that's the leadership that I deliver to ensure that's the case.
Anna Sarwar.
The fact of the matter is, John Swinney and the SNP aren't working, and Scots can see that. Our NHS is fighting for survival under John Swinney, and Scots are paying the price for his incompetence. Just this week we heard the case of Gerard McBride, who has waited 76 weeks for hip and knee surgery despite crippling osteoarthritis. We heard from Alison, a mum, who told the BBC that she had to pay £4,500 for private cataract surgery. She said, and I quote, "I would have gone blind before the NHS would have seen me." And we heard from Elizabeth, who had to spend £18,000 of her own savings for a hip operation due to long waits on the NHS. This is the price Scots are paying for SNP failure. And the situation is so bad that Dr Ian Kennedy of the BMA has said that the NHS is dying before our eyes. Isn't this a damning indictment of John Swinney and the SNP, who are destroying our NHS?
First Minister.
So the government is taking the steps to make sure that the NHS is able to have the capacity and the resources to deliver on people's expectations and their needs. So, to give two examples of that, the first is that we've put in place a record financial settlement for the National Health Service, which the Labour Party could not bring itself to vote for in the recent budget. And secondly, in April 2024, we promised to put in place an additional 64,000 appointments and procedures by the end of March 2025, and we exceeded that target, delivering 105,500 additional procedures in the first year of my term in office as First Minister. So what this government will do is that we will focus on meeting the needs of the people of Scotland, put the money in place to do so, not duck the responsibilities as Mr Sarwar has done, and make sure people get the treatment that they require.
Anna Sarwar.
This is a failing First Minister in a failing SNP government. John Swinney took personal responsibility for tackling the crisis in Scotland's NHS, and now things are getting worse. Waiting lists up, thousands more Scots forced to go private, and cancer waiting times the worst they have ever been. And as the crisis in our NHS deepens, where was the Health Secretary this week? In Japan, lecturing on digital healthcare while he can't even sort an NHS app at home. And while he was away, we did get a rare moment of candour from Public Health Minister Jenny Minto. When asked about the worst cancer waiting times on record, she said to STV, "Are people losing their lives due to later diagnosis? Yes, they may well be." An SNP minister admitting that SNP failure is costing lives. So what does John Swinney say to the families left picking up the pieces of losing a loved one too soon?
First Minister.
What I would say to families is that the government is doing all that it possibly can do to make sure that we have in place services that meet the needs of individuals. And the reassurance I would give them is this. When individuals are identified as requiring treatment, the median waiting time for people getting that treatment is 3 days. That means that the majority of patients are getting the urgent intervention within a matter of 3 days after their assessment. That is what the Scottish Government is doing. Now, I accept that on the 62-day target, we have not got the performance around the country that we require to have. But we know from individual parts of the country that those services can be delivered. And what the Health Secretary and I are focused on doing is making sure that in every single part of the country, people can rely on the National Health Service being there when they require it. That's the commitment I give to Parliament, and that's what we're focused on delivering.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And Presiding Officer, on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, can I thank you for your service to this Parliament as an MSP and as Presiding Officer, and particularly your commitment to the integrity and values of this chamber. We wish you well. Presiding Officer, I've listened to what the First Minister's had to say about cancer, digging into the statistics of one health board, but when it comes down to this, when cancer is coming for you, you deserve to know that you have the best possible chance at survival. But under this SNP government, that just isn't happening. Even if you haven't had cancer, you will know somebody who has. But now, patients referred with an urgent suspicion of cancer, treatment times for them are worse than at any point on record. When this potentially lethal disease turns your world upside down, the last thing you need is a long wait for life-saving care. So can I ask the First Minister, don't these people deserve better?
First Minister.
As I hope I've demonstrated in my handling of the questions today, I take this issue and the delivery of cancer care incredibly seriously. So I don't in any way dispute the points that Mr Cole-Hamilton puts to me. But what I do want to provide is, and Mr Cole-Hamilton posed his question to me in a particular way about when people have a cancer diagnosis, they need to know they will get the urgent intervention. And the reassurance that I will give Mr Cole-Hamilton, and I know it's statistics, but it matters, is that the median wait, once a diagnosis is given, is 3 days. So the intervention could hardly be any more immediate than the 3-day intervention for the majority of patients. So what the government will do, I accept that the 62-day target is not being met sufficiently well around the country, and we are focused on strengthening capacity to make sure that is the case. But we are treating more patients with cancer on time and within both standards compared to the same quarter prior to the pandemic. And the pandemic has disrupted healthcare, but we are on cancer care treating more patients with cancer on time within both standards. And I hope that gives some reassurance to Mr Cole-Hamilton about the steps the government is taking.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Presiding Officer, it is the delay in diagnosis that we're talking about here, and his reassurance will come as cold comfort to everyone waiting for the post this morning in want of an appointment for diagnosis. His regret won't save lives. In Scotland, more people die of lung cancer than any other form of the disease. It kills 4,000 Scots every year. If you come from a poorer background, your chances are far worse. 3 years ago, the UK National Screening Committee recommended the whole of the United Kingdom introduce lung cancer screening to help prevent it or to catch it early. It would be targeted at those who are at the highest risk, people aged between 55 and 74 who smoke or who used to smoke. And experts have called it a game changer. Presiding Officer, survival rates for lung cancer in Scotland aren't much better than they were in the 1970s. This intervention could save hundreds of lives every year. This cancer screening programme is being rolled out across the whole of England, but not here. Why not? Why are we years behind? Why are we so slow? Why are Scots missing out on this life-saving detection service?
First Minister.
President Officer, I will look with care at the points that Mr Cole-Hamilton has put to me. But of course, we have a track record in Scotland of screening programmes that are formidable and significant in the effect that they have. Particularly the Bill screening programme is one example of those provisions that we have in place. The Government, as I set out in my speech on health service issues in January, and again in my speech on public service reform just last week, The Government is shifting the focus ever more to early intervention and prevention to ensure that we identify conditions that can deliver better outcomes if identified at an earlier stage, and that will be the focus of the Government's policy approach on this question.
Question number 4, Joe Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the Sarcoma UK report, unique amongst cancers.
First Minister.
President, as I've already recognised, I fully recognise the challenges we continue to face in cancer care. However, this report highlights that specialist cancer care in Scotland is of a high standard. I am committed to ensuring that everyone affected by cancer, including those with rarer forms like sarcoma, receive timely, equitable and compassionate care. We will publish our refreshed Scottish referral guidelines for suspected cancer, including for sarcoma and bone cancer this summer, to ensure that patients are on the right pathways at the right time. The Scottish Government will continue to work to identify where improvements can and must be made.
Joe Fitzpatrick.
Minister for his answer, and I'm sure that he agrees that while sarcoma is a rare form of cancer, every person affected deserves timely diagnosis, access to specialist care and the best possible treatment of support. Can the First Minister provide an update on the work the Scottish Government is undertaking already to ensure that this can happen, and will he ensure his Government engages with Sarcoma UK on the 16 recommendations in their report?
Minister.
I certainly give that commitment for engagement in relation to the recommendations in the report. As I've indicated in my answer to Mr Cole-Hamilton, early diagnosis is a critical factor on this issue, and the Detect Cancer Earlier programme has led to the delivery of rapid cancer diagnostic services, which are a key tool in taking forward this work. Our 6th diagnostic service opened in NHS Forth Valley in May of this year, and we've invested over £40 million over the past 5 years to support cancer services and improve waiting times, and the budget that Mr Fitzpatrick supported earlier this year will assist us in that endeavour.
Brief supplementary, Jackie Bailey.
Cancer is Scotland's biggest killer, whether it is a rare sarcoma or a more common cancer. Yet waiting times for cancer treatment in the first quarter of this year were the worst on record. And quoting median waits, First Minister, is no comfort for those waiting longer. This is a matter of life or death, and your own Minister accepted that people were dying as a result of these delays. In the very week that the Chair of the BMA said that the NHS was dying before his eyes, how much longer do we need to tolerate this SNP government who are not delivering improvements and continue to let down staff and patients with devastating results?
First Minister.
I want to reassure members of the public that this issue has the focus and the attention of the Government, the First Minister and the Health Secretary. I've set out already, and I'll repeat, forgive me.
Let's hear one another.
Forgive me, Presiding Officer, I'll repeat some of what I've said already. We are treating more patients with cancer on time within both standards compared to the same quarter 6 years ago. So we have expanded capacity. We recognise there are challenges in waiting times, but the Government has put the investment in place to enable that to be the case. We can see where the best practice operates within the country, and the Health Secretary and I are working to ensure that that is deployed in all parts of the country.
Thank you. We have extremely high interesting questions today, so if we can be concise, that will enable more members an opportunity. I call Tim Eagle at question number 5.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to reports that several local authorities are delaying the introduction of the visitor levy.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Visitor Levy Scotland Act 2024 gives councils the discretionary power to apply a local visitor levy if they think it is right for their area. If, after they have consulted local businesses, communities and tourism organisations, a local authority does not consider that timing or circumstances are right to introduce a levy, then it is entirely appropriate for them to make that decision. That is what the Highlands and Western Isles councils have done. They have assessed the appropriateness of introducing such a measure and decided not to proceed currently, while the City of Edinburgh and the City of Glasgow councils are proceeding with their proposals. That is local democracy in action.
Tim Eagle.
Presiding Officer, there is no political disaster like an SNP disaster. Not content with an Island Act that doesn't work, ferries that can barely get out the docks, the visitor levy is causing a crisis amongst already vulnerable rural businesses. You can mutter away, but it's true. Orkney, Shetland and Western Isles Council have all delayed the introduction of a visitor levy, with the latter
Let's hear
saying...
one another.
They don't want to hear it. With the latter saying it could risk its visitor economy, destroying tourism in Scotland. Meanwhile, South Ayrshire Council has abandoned its plans altogether. Over 750 small businesses in my region signed an open letter to the Deputy First Minister calling for changes to make the levy fairer. Has the First Minister reflected on the concerns from businesses, and will he at least agree today to the industry ask to move to a flat rate charge?
First Minister.
President Officer, I've heard from the Conservative Party over many years the need to ensure that there is local decision-making capability in different parts of the country. And that's exactly what the Government and what Parliament has legislated for. We have legislated to enable local authorities to take a decision after consultation if they judge that to be right. Now, the Conservatives have got to decide what they believe in. Do they believe in local democracy or not? Every time they spend most of their time accusing us of centralisation. When we give local authorities the decision-making power, they complain about that as well. The Conservatives haven't got a clue what they're arguing for in this Parliament.
Brief supplementary, Alistair Allen.
The inclusion in the Government's recent consultation on a cruise ship levy included the option of a port of entry model, which has been welcomed by the tourist sector in the islands. So can the First Minister confirm that the Government will give consideration to the views that they expressed about this as a potential model for island areas?
First Minister.
So we've consulted widely on a proposed cruise ship levy, as we promised that we would do. The responses are currently being analysed, and all views will be considered as we make decisions on next steps in relation to this area of policy.
Question number 6, Marie McNeill.
To ask the First Minister what assessment the Scottish Government has made of the latest Office of National Statistics inflation statistics and any implications for its work to support low-income households.
First Minister.
President Officer, the latest official inflation figures show annual CPI inflation was 3.4% in May. This is above the Bank of England's 2% target, but official forecasters expect inflation to fall later this year and return close to target in 2026. We are acutely aware of pressure on household budgets across Scotland, which is why in 25-26 we continue to allocate over £3 billion a year to policies that tackle poverty and the cost of living, including mitigating the impact of the harshest Westminster policies like the bedroom tax and the benefit cap.
Marie McNeill.
The First Minister for that answer. With the main rate of inflation at the highest rate for more than a year, food prices growing for a third month, increased national insurance contributions and planned welfare cuts, the cost of living crisis fuelled by Labour's obsession with austerity is unfortunately still hurting families. And does the First Minister agree with me that given the current Labour fiasco on welfare policy, it's increasingly clear that only the SNP Scottish Government are serious about tackling poverty and giving vital and compassionate support to families with children and disabled people in Scotland?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has taken a number of measures to address the cost of living challenges that members of the public face, whether that's about ensuring that we have the investment, for example, in early learning and childcare, which saves families thousands of pounds in childcare costs, or whether that's the investment in the Scottish Child Payment, which boosts household income for those in poverty, or the steps that we in the Scottish Government are taking to lift the two-child limit, a cap that should have been lifted as one of the first acts of the United Kingdom Labour Government. So we will always take actions to support families who are facing financial hardship and difficulty. But of course we face a new threat, which is the benefit cuts agenda of the United Kingdom Labour Government. And at a time when many Labour MPs are now saying that these cuts are unacceptable, isn't it just telling that Anas Sarwar is supporting the Prime Minister in implementing the benefit cuts? It demonstrates that Anas Sarwar won't be standing up for Scotland anytime soon.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries, and I call Edward Mountain.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Highlanders have now lost yet another medical speciality from our area. Our last vascular surgeon has been forced to leave as the service has been so downgraded it's no longer functional or safe. His loss can be added to the loss of our only interventional radiologist in the region as well as maternity services in Caithness. First Minister, these are critical losses, more critical to the Highlands than the inevitable loss to the SNP of the Inverness and Nairn seat in 2026. First Minister, your government is condoning and forcing Highlanders to get into cars and travel hundreds of miles when seriously ill for treatment. When, First Minister, will you put a stop to the destruction of our local health care in the Highlands, as it appears your Cabinet Secretary for Health is incapable of doing so?
First Minister.
There's a number of issues in Mr Mountain's question that I need to address, because there are a number of different factors at play. First of all, the issues in relation to maternity services in Caithness have been addressed because of clinical assessments about the most appropriate way in which services should be delivered. And I think Parliament would take a dim view of ministers that ignored clinical assessments of the safety and the efficacy of maternity services, and we would not be doing anyone a service if we ignored that clinical opinion. Now, on other questions, such as the point on vascular surgery, we will face challenges in different parts of the country. Indeed, that lies at the heart of some of the issues around about cancer care that I have addressed already, of our ability to recruit clinical leadership to deliver these services. I have absolutely no desire for us not to be able to provide services of the type that Mr Mountain has raised. But if we struggle to recruit individuals to deliver those services, those are practical realities that the government has to address. And lastly, let me say this to Mr Mountain. The government has invested in establishing a national treatment centre in Inverness, which is delivering thousands of procedures on behalf of Highlanders and people from other parts of the country because of the focus on delivering high-quality healthcare in that environment. That's an indication of the Scottish Government's commitment to the Highlands, one of many other commitments that this Government will continue to deliver.
Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of the recent announcement that the RTS turn-off is to be phased out. It has been delayed. Now, this is welcome, as the experience of many of my constituents has been far from positive, with some making appointments only to have the engineers not turn up or actually have them cancelled at short notice. So would the First Minister join me in calling on anyone who has an RTS meter to contact their energy supplier as soon as possible, and if they have any issues, to contact their MSP or advice services like Advice Direct Scotland and Age Scotland for support.
First Minister.
Well, I agree with Mr McMillan. This has taken far too long to be resolved, and I would echo his calls for individuals who are affected to make the appropriate contact with their supplier urgently, and if issues remain, to alert Advice Services and Ofgem if they have any issues to address. But I'm glad that we have some respite, but it's taken far too long to get there.
Claire Baker.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The rise in recorded rape and attempted rape of 15% in the past year is highly alarming. This coalesces with the increasing normalisation of violence and sexual activity, where non-fatal strangulation has become more prevalent and mainstream. I have been calling for government action to challenge this culture, to be clear on the health and criminal consequences, and invest much more heavily in prevention work with young people. Will the First Minister commit to taking this action forward?
First Minister.
I am very happy to associate myself with the comments of Claire Baker. In relation to recorded crime, total recorded crime shows very little change. It's down less than 1% compared to the previous year. And of course, the level of recorded crime in Scotland is now down 40% since 2006-07. But within those figures, there is a significant rise in the reporting of sexual offences. I think what this is indicative of is a greater willingness of victims to come forward, and I welcome that and I encourage that. There is more historical reporting of individual cases, and I welcome that as well, so that these issues can be pursued. But there is also, as Claire Baker rightly points out, a culture that is more prevalent, which normalises sexual violence against women. And I deprecate that, I condemn it, and I commit the government and commit my leadership to ensuring that the behaviour of men is properly and fully confronted to address the legitimate concerns that Claire Baker puts to Parliament today.
David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given the rising cost of living, free school meals have an important role to play in reducing pressures on families, whilst improving the lives of young people across Scotland. And that's more important than ever in the face of the continued austerity from Westminster. Can the First Minister advise how the Scottish Government's recent work in expanding free school meals to pupils in S1 to S3 in 8 council areas, including in my constituency of Kirkcaldy, will support this work to ensure that every child has the best start in life, regardless of their background?
First Minister.
Sir, I very much associate myself with the comments of Mr Torrance in relation to the challenges around the cost of living. On Monday, I set out the approach the Government is taking to the delivery of a pilot exercise in 8 local authority areas. I visited Springburn Academy in the City of Glasgow on Monday and saw first-hand the benefits of the offer of a healthy, nutritious free school meal to young people in S1 to S3. Those young people are in receipt, or their families are in receipt of the Scottish Child Payment, and the Government will take forward this proposal and it will be rolled out in about 60 schools across 8 local authority areas in the course of the next school year, and that could benefit over 6,000 young people and contribute to tackling the cost of living issue, and also give young people a healthy and nutritious school meal as part of their day.
Jackson Carlow.
So it's almost a year to the day that we learned of the untimely loss to cancer of Professor Alison Britton, an outstanding public servant whose timing of whose death meant that her contribution to public life here in Scotland I don't think was properly recognised by this Parliament, not least the 2 groundbreaking landmark reports commissioned by the Scottish Government that she produced into transvaginal mesh. Her loss is keenly felt by me, all her colleagues, those who work for her, but in particular by the thousands of women who suffered the injustice of mesh and who saw in her championship leadership. Will the First Minister undertake to revisit the 2 reports and the many recommendations which the Government accepted in full, which I don't believe yet have been fully implemented, update Parliament on the progress in regard to that? And will he also ask the Health Secretary to work with the Labour Government at Westminster to revisit the recommendations of the Hughes report into compensation for the women who suffered the mesh injustice and who have waited far too long?
First Minister.
I'm very happy to take forward those points, and I take this opportunity to express my appreciation for the distinguished public service and the distinguished clinical leadership of Professor Alison Britton. I think what is perhaps the best way to take this forward is if I meet with Mr Carlow to discuss these issues over the course of the summer, so that I can properly and fully take stock of the progress that has been made and what requires to be undertaken, and then we can report to Parliament at the start of the parliamentary session in September. And I will ask the Health Secretary to engage with the United Kingdom Government on the Hughes report, but I will make arrangements to see Mr Carlow to discuss those issues.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister may be aware that Amy planned to make up to 100 road maintenance workers in Ayrshire and Dumfries and Galloway redundant. These workers are funded by a Scottish Government contract. The A77 is one of the most dangerous roads in Scotland, with constant disruption to the economy of the South West due to its poor state of repair. My constituents have frequent lengthy waits at roadworks and often miles of diversions. Will the First Minister travel this road with me and explain to my constituents why 100 workers who should be helping to maintain this important road are losing their jobs?
First Minister.
I understand these issues are the subject of consultation between Amy and the relevant trade unions, and I would obviously want to make sure that that is all done properly and in accordance with the fair work principles of the Government. So I understand the importance of the point that Carol Mockin is raising in Parliament today, but there will be a process that has to be gone through about those issues, and it may not be the outcome that is achieved is the one that Carol Mockin fears. So I will ask the Transport Secretary to consider the issues that have been raised and to reply to Carol Mockin about how these points can be properly and fully addressed.
Christine Graham.
Well, thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, on 24th April, at First Minister's Questions, I asked about the guidance on mothballing rural nurseries, and I was told then that the guidance was already under review. Now, we're at the end of the school and nursery year, so can I ask, is the review concluded, and if so, when will it be published?
First Minister.
President, I understand that there's to be dialogue with stakeholders over the summer in relation to the guidance, which is, of course, part of the necessary process of dialogue the Government has to go through when it's reviewing such material. The local authorities preparing for the new academic year should follow the existing guidance when considering these questions, and the guidance is clear on the need for local decisions to be based upon effective engagement with the community, reflecting the needs of local families. And I know that issue will matter significantly to Christine Graham, given her local engagement on all of these issues, which she's raised with me previously and which I know are at the heart of her concerns.
Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On Monday, for the third time in as many months, I visited the usual place in Dumfries. As the First Minister knows from his own recent visit, Craig McEwen and his team operate a life-changing hospitality-based project which equips young people with disabilities and ASN needs with the experience, confidence and skills to enter the workplace. But last weekend it was confirmed that the usual place has been unsuccessful in its application to the Scottish Government's Learning Disability Support Fund. If no further Scottish Government funding is confirmed soon, Craig McEwen fears that the usual place could have to shut its doors for good in December. First Minister, we cannot let this happen. So will Mr Swinney engage with his officials and Inspiring Scotland to turn the warm words that he spoke during his recent visit into urgently needed financial support?
First Minister.
I value enormously the usual place. It's a venue that I know well and I've engaged with on a number of occasions over my ministerial life, and I visited the usual place just a few weeks ago to see the good work that's in place. The funding round that Mr Hoy has referred to is a competitive funding round, and the decisions that were made there are taken at arm's length from governments. It's an assessment of individual applications. And he is correct, the usual place were unsuccessful. However, there is interim funding in place through other government channels of funding which have been put in place, both from South of Scotland Enterprise and also from one of if my memory serves me right, one of the health-based funds, which are supporting the work of the usual place, and I'm committed to trying to find a solution in that respect. So I don't really think it is fair for Mr Hoy to say there hasn't been government funding put into or effort put in to try to find funding, because what I've just put on the record refutes what Mr Hoy is saying. So I'm completely committed to doing all that we can to support the usual place, which does outstanding work in transforming the lives of young people in our country.
Briefest supplementary, Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This morning, Oxfam published a report showing a huge increase in private jet travel in and out of Scotland. Private jets are a disaster for the climate. They're 20 to 30 times more polluting than regular commercial air travel. 2 of the 3 airports that have seen the significant increase are owned by the Scottish Government. Air departure tax has not been devolved, but could the First Minister commit to introducing a charge at Scottish Government-owned airports to ensure that these super-rich elites pay for the amount of pollution they're throwing into our atmosphere?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I've already stated that I'm interested in the suggestion of higher tax rates on private jet flights. We continue to explore all options for implementing air departure tax, but this must be done in a way that protects the connectivity of the Highlands and Islands and the lifeline services these communities rely upon. So I understand and I sympathise with the points that Mr Greer is raising today, and we will consider that as part of the steps on air departure tax. But as I think Mr Greer will know, there is an incredible amount of complexity in these issues, and we have to make sure we've got a sustainable way that doesn't in any way undermine the approach that we take in the Highlands and Islands.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Douglas Ross, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the gallery to do so.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please, subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.